1 and 11. Can't really explain, I can't really talk about it because it'll give too much away, but we are skipping ahead. You guys will get to know a few characters. And like I said, chapter 11 is split into 3 sections, and I think considering the heart attack I'm about to have, we'll probably stop between each section just to cool off.
Take a breathe. Right there.
All right.
Please turn that fireplace off.
All right. Here we go. Chapter 11. Thunder underscored the last words Jennifer had heard, which was strange since she had seen no clouds in the sky when she had entered the precinct. The boom was abrupt, like a banging against the sky, but only the trailing echo sounded like normal thunder. Had she not been godsmacked by the current situation, she would have investigated the sound's origin.
I'm off the force?
She asked, trying to understand what was happening. The chief of police leaned back in his chair.
You're taking a leave of absence. You're not being discharged.
Without thinking, Jennifer looked at and wiggled her left arm, which was cast and held in a position with a sling. She had been released from the hospital with the instructions to take it easy and minimize movement. However, to Jennifer, that did not mean that she had to take an extended vacation.
I'm still an able-bodied.
She countered.
The arm is the only thing really damaged, and it isn't even my trigger hand.
She withheld the fact that the injury, as well as the miscellaneous scrapes and burns, still throbbed with pain despite the medication she had been given. But she had never been one to bow out over pain.
Look,
The chief of police reassured.
I know you don't like dead time, but you need to heal. We need you at 100% before you jump back in. It's only a couple weeks.
Jennifer shook her head in disbelief.
Less than a year ago, Cruz took a bullet to the head, and he was back on his roster in 5 days. It doesn't make any sense.
Officer, you are relieved of duty until further notice. This isn't a debate. It's an order.
Jennifer nodded, affirming the nonsense more than the instruction. As she exited the chief's office, she noticed a majority of eyes on her, so she detoured to the restroom to collect her thoughts and give the other officers time to return to their tasks and forget about her. In the mirror above the sinks, she saw a woman whose dark complexion was glittered with tiny pink cuts in mid-healing. Her thin nose arched down to a point at the prominent dip of the Cupid's bow of her upper lip. When she was young, her parents called her Birdie.
Guess I've got a broken wing.
She thought, inspecting her cast. Elfie had wanted to use a permanent marker to make the cast look like a cannon. That way Jen would never be without her piece. Jennifer was glad that she had refused. After a sufficient amount of time had passed, she left the restroom and walked straight for the file cabinet housing old case files. She indiscriminately dug out a cross-section of files and clumsily dumped them into her duffel bag. If she had to stay out of the precinct, she could at least do some research while she rested. Furthermore, the chief of police dismissal was suspicious. Something else was driving him to send her off, and she could not shake the fact that it had something to do with Excel. As if to fling the thought away, she twitched her head. She was getting as bad as Eric. Without looking back, she walked out the door and scanned the sky. Indeed, it was a clear summer day. Where had that thunder come from? She could not help but be reminded of the explosion that caused her injury. Scanning the sky for telltale smoke revealed nothing but more blue sky. If there had been some sort of explosion, there was no evidence. Frustrated by the day's lack of answers, she readjusted her duffel bag and marched to her car. She saw none of the city as she drove home. Images, thoughts, and memories screened her mind from the environment, and her body automatically operated the car like muscle memory. In all her life, she had never been particularly reflective, but there were a handful of moments in her history that forced her to reconsider her life's direction. It was never an existential sort of crisis. In fact, those times were little more than readjustments to a strategy, and after decisions were made, Jennifer usually did not allow herself to second-guess them. A flurry of images from her past flickered in her mind, driving nonstop for hours, disjointed conversations and dancing, the New York skyline, a string of terribly cold nights on the street, a new friend being assaulted, the night she decided to join the military, and later, the New Pearly police force. Now, that same force, which had been such a comfort and anchor years ago, was becoming her enemy. She could no longer deny Eric's intuition. Something was wrong in the city, and the police were part of it. Unfortunately, her sense of morality would not permit her to ignore or become complicit in the disreputable machinations. She joined the force as a tool of justice, and she would continue to follow her conscience. She wasted no time spilling the contents of her duffel bag onto the living room floor once she arrived home. If she could find patterns, then maybe she could determine her next move. She began stacking the folders by month before dismantling their contents and rearranging them into piles focused on persons of interest, crime scene evidence, locations, and assigned personnel. The next few hours became a storm of faces, addresses, dates, work shifts, and invisible lines that connected ghosts. At some point, Marilyn ventured out from her makeshift bedroom to ask what Jennifer was doing, to which she supplied a vague answer involving work. In Jennifer's mind, New Pearly was rebuilding itself, constructing a new narrative in her mind. A hidden story, like the unscrupulous habits of a child found only after digging through her diary. If she could have trusted her compatriots, she would have just requested a warrant to search the Moralist Party headquarters. But as she dug, it seemed more and more like politics and terrorism were close cousins. There were no plans, but Jennifer understood the nature of instinct. It was often the result of one's deeper cognition finding connection in mounds of seemingly unrelated data. Ignoring the stiffness in her body, she flung herself up to her laptop, which sat in a small alcove beside the kitchen. She cursed the difficulty in typing queries with only one hand. A labored search reminded her of something she had forgotten and confirmed Jennifer's suspicion. The New Pearly mayoral race was this year. There would be another attack soon, and it had something to do with the upcoming election.